Danny's all here, so we'll get things kicked off. This is, again, a continuation of our budget process. And want to thank everybody for participating. It's obviously been a very challenging process this year, the most challenging I think this city has had in many, many, many years. Everybody I've talked to. We're kind of honing in on what options exist out there. We've been meeting with obviously all the department heads, met with the different unions, and kind of set some parameters. And everybody's working on a resolution to this, because we do have to have a resolution here in a few. About a month, I guess. What we're going to do is walk through where we're at right now, some of the things that we know now that we didn't know here a few weeks ago when we met, and we'll just kind of follow through on this PowerPoint here. Again, first slide is how we got where we are, how we get to this point. And again, I guess the mantra is, our expenses are going up, but our revenues are going down, and it created a pretty significant deficit in our budget. And what's contributing to that is, obviously, I think we're all aware the state has changed how they distribute statutory revenue, and that's one portion of our revenue that we get from the state, and they are withholding $350,000. That would be our normal statutory revenue amount. So again, we're saying the city, we're withholding that, and we'll go through it a little different, but you get some of that back if you meet certain criteria. But that's resulting in some of our deficit. Personal property tax, that's still being discussed to eliminate that. As far as we can tell, it's still on their radar screen. We're not aware of any additional revenue to offset that. That's what they are talking about. But that could amount to about $160,000. Census reduction. The city's population went down, and again, that would have an effect of about $50,000 on the general fund, a reduction. Hospitalization increase. We had a 14% increase in hospitalization, which is about $70,000. Our retirement increased to about $140,000. And again, that was due to how they calculate our retirement. We went to MERS. They found I don't know if they call it an anomaly, but the way they calculated the retirement contribution to the city before was not entirely accurate, and that was through their actuarial reports. Now, what's interesting is the same actuarial company that does it for MERS, but MERS must have picked up on an anomaly and questioned that, and that, again, drives up the city's contribution toward retirement. And again, I guess that's a good thing in the long run, because you hate to come in a few years and find that we've got a huge catastrophe. So even though it's difficult, those are the things that have to be planned for the future. And then we budgeted for retiree payout. We have potentially, is it 8 or is it 2 more? Maybe 9 employees that could retire over the next couple of years. And again, we have to budget for their payout, their accumulated sick and vacation time. So we budgeted $300,000 in this year's budget for that.
How many people is that?
That could depend on the payout. We figured that would be 3, maybe 4 people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And each person has a little bit, different accumulation of what the payout would be. But we figure that's 3 to 4 people. So essentially, those are the big ticket items and how we got to this point. How we, we're about $800,000 short in our budget. Since we met last, the governor had presented his proposal for statutory revenue and how that was going to be addressed. That did go to the House. It was passed by the House, and my understanding it's moving on to the Senate to be addressed. Now, what we're hearing is that expect the governor to get what the governor wants, and we've asked a number of people that. And again, with the House, the Senate, and the governor all being Republican, they're expecting this to pass in something very similar to what we see here. Now, it could be adjusted a little bit in some different way than we know right now, but I think it's boiling down to what we see is probably going to be pretty similar to what we end up with. And again, with that, they eliminated the revenue sharing. For us, that means $350,000 or 44% of our total revenue sharing that we receive. He's proposing to reestablish that and establish it as we call an economic vitality incentive program. So essentially, the money's being taken away, but he's saying if you do certain things, you can get some of that back. And not all of it. We can't get it all back. We can get about 2/3 of it back. And that would amount to about $220,000. And what they're saying, and a lot of this is not fully clear on how they're going to, what their expectations are yet. I think it's still a work in progress. But there's 3 things that they're saying we would need to do as a community, and this is for all communities in the state, to get that 2/3 of the money back. And again, they divided that in thirds. So if we do one of these, we get about $73,000 back. We do a second one, another 73, a third one, about another 73. So the first one is called Transparency of Information. It's a dashboard, basically publishing our information more clearly on our websites in different areas to make it more clear to the public on how we do our budgets and other things. And I think that's something that should be achievable with,
Just a quick question. Do you know if that will involve any type of different accounting procedures?
No.
Every city currently follows the same generally accepted accounting procedure, correct?
I think it's put in a form that's more understandable to the public. So they do have a format. They want to see that put into this format and then published so it's more clear to the public. So I think that's something, barring some change to that hopefully should be achievable. Collaboration among entities. And again, that's the idea of visiting with our neighbors, Bessemer, Wakefield, the townships, the county, and saying, where can we partner? Where can we share? And again, for this first year, they're looking at coming up with a plan, basically. Not that we have to have consolidated efforts right now, but come up with a well-thought-out plan and say, here's the areas that we think we can work together on. So again, that has to be completed by...
And one point of clarification, the way I read that is it doesn't include any previous
Correct.
Joint efforts that have been made on any communities working together at this time. So it has to be new projects going forward.
Right. Things we've done before will not count. Simply, a lot of communities may change to a public safety aspect. We've already done that, so we won't get credit for that. Or a wastewater treatment plant where we share services, we won't get credit for that. So it's unfortunate. We were hoping that we could get credit for those. And initially they said they thought we would, but now that's off the table.
Dumb question. Can we cut the services?
And then
For like a week and reestablish it?
Maybe there's some creative way to do that, but I'm going to guess probably not.
We'll do it this fiscal year and start that thing?
Yeah.
Just a thought anyway.
I think we're going to have to look forward to new opportunities. So what that'll do is, we'll meet with all of our counterparts in the other communities and, have those discussions and hopefully come to terms on areas where we could share services. And the third is employee benefit concessions. And that's, again, working with the unions, negotiating some changes to the essentially healthcare and retirement plans, I think, were the biggies. And some of these apply to new employees, and those are, I wouldn't say fairly simple, but those are usually something that isn't too painful. As you hire someone new, their benefit levels change. And some of these apply to possibly all employees right now. And one of the big ones in here that we saw was a change of retirement. Basically, there's a factor on a multiplier that they use to calculate a person's retirement. And they want to change that factor from, as an example, right now, a general in AFSCME is at 2.25. They want to change it down to 1.5. And for public safety, they're at 2.5. They want to change it down to 2. And the reason it's different for public safety is they don't have Social Security. So they usually have a higher factor.
Is that a savings rate? Is that what the factor is?
That's applied to this calculation, Julie.
You take your average, your FAC, your average salary, times the factor, times your years of service. And that's how your pension is calculated. So your average pay times the factor, times your years of service. So it's about a third reduction for general.
So it could be approximately a third of someone's their expected retirement. So they take a third less. Mm-hmm. And again, for the employees that have kind of banked on that over the years, they've been working for 25, 30 years, and they're getting close to retirement. It's a huge factor. Well, it's a huge factor for everybody, but probably more so for them. If you're, I'll say, younger is the right word, but if you have maybe another 10 or 20 years to retirement, you can maybe switch and change things a little bit and prepare for your retirement. You have time to react to that. For employees that, they have 1 or 2 years left, their time to react and, adjust for their retirement has been eliminated.
How is the average salary? Is that calculation for that still intact?
We have different levels of figuring out the average salary.
Okay.
Some can include up to 2080 accrued. Some can only include up to 800. And then the new hires don't include any
for
accrued sick leave.
for management staff.
And absence.
And AFSCME for new hires.
So we have like 3 different levels.
And is the average salary based on the last 5 years?
The highest 5 consecutive.
Highest 5.
But different for public safety, there are 3.
There's the highest 3 for public safety.
So if somebody goes to a part-time level, if they've been working for 10 years at a certain salary and they move down to a part-time, they can go back to that higher.
And that's still an unknown how they're going to apply that. It wasn't really clear if that's going to apply to everybody, new hires, or something in between. They've talked about kind of a hybrid model where possibly, and I don't know if this would work from an actuarial standpoint, but that maybe you could freeze people's retirement at this point and then convert to something else going forward. So they've accrued retirement to this point, and maybe a change to a 401k or some other form of a retirement package. But again, those details aren't there. We're actually going to meet with MERS next week and try to find out if they have more information that can help us on that. Because right now it's very, very unclear on how that's going to be applied. And there's other things in the employee benefit concessions too that they're looking to negotiate with the unions on. So again, assuming we can achieve some of that, hopefully we get some revenue back in over the next fiscal year. Would be the goal. So we go on to the next slide. It says when we last met. Okay. You can see our general fund deficit. You calculate all these things in. We're at about $837,500 is what we have to make up or change in this proposed budget. And the other factor that's hitting us, and this is separate from the general fund, is our equipment fund. It's kind of a chicken and egg or a catch-22. We have a separate equipment fund that we use to replace equipment. It pays for our mechanics. It basically manages our equipment at the city. And it's been a very effective tool for the city to get new equipment, but it's a standalone fund. And it charges out for its services, whether it's the water department, sewer department, streets, parks, whatever. And they pay back into this fund when they use the equipment. And by reducing, if you will, the number of employees, I guess it's a direct reflection on that. As we have fewer employees out there working on city projects, there's less revenue coming back into that fund. So we're anticipating that we're going to have potentially a $50,000 reduction in the revenue in that fund. So we have to come up with a way to solve that also. Now, it's not a general fund issue, but it's an impact on our equipment fund as a result of reduction in the number of...
Are the payments that are made to this fund, are they reflected in that general ledger as rental?
Yes.
Okay, I wondered if that...
Yeah, equipment rent.
That's kind of an aside, but it's out there and we need to address that. So where are we tonight? We have the roughly $837,000 deficit that we have to trim out. We have to have a balanced budget. We have 3 different, if you will, entities and ways of looking at, possibly different ways of looking at how do we save, how do we reduce the budget. We have the AFSCME group that we're working with. Again, they have a contract that they're working within. We have to work with them within that contract. We have public safety that has a contract too. Their contract is a little different than AFSCME, so they have different things in there, and we have to look at it a little differently. Then we have administration, who doesn't have a contract, and there's a lot more flexibility in working with the administration group. But each group is looking at it separately. They essentially know what needs to be trimmed out of their budget at this point, and they're evaluating what options are out there. And we'll get to that here in a little bit. First, we'll look at public safety. And feel free to jump in if something's a little different than what I'm saying or it's changed since we talked last. But this is a scenario that public safety is looking at right now. Essentially, they have $250,000 out of their budget, and they're looking at where can they do that. Right now, we had $25,000 in for a squad car. We're looking at taking that out. Their fleet, again, at some point we're going to have to replace that squad car. But talking through it, as we reduce the number of employees, I hate to joke about it, but I guess you have more cars than you have people, and So we have a pretty good fleet out there right now. We can get by for another year, maybe two, but at some point we have to replace the squad car. But right now we can get by without that. Reducing overtime. We budget about $50,000 a year for overtime. Looking at reducing that by half.
Yeah,
So 50% reduction in overtime. And again, maybe you want to talk about where that overtime is generated. How, and where the reduction is going to come into play.
Our overtime generator, we try to maintain a staffing level of 2 on nights, 2 on days. And due to the changes, we're going to be looking at maintaining a minimal staff, just having one person on at times. So if someone has a vacation day and we have 2 people on nights, we're ultimately going to be working with 1 person on the night shift. So, and like on weekends, typically now we're going to have 1 day shift out. We have a 12-hour shift. We'll have 1 officer working a day shift, 1 on night shift. And we're going to rely on our mutual agreements, work with Hurley, and build our relationship with Gibbet County. And everybody's facing these challenges, so we just need to work together to try to resolve some of these issues.
Are written agreements something that you get into?
We currently have written agreements with Hurley, Iron County, Wisconsin, and Gibbet County.
And there's no fees involved or transfer?
Well, there's never been fees because it's always worked out between the two. We backed up Hurley, they backed us up. Hurley seems to be our closest relationship, being that they're the closest. And we've always helped each other out, so it's worked out pretty evenly.
Do you allocate by hours?
We've never kept track of it. I think everyone just keeps a call for service. Just have an idea what we're doing there. The difficulty with Wisconsin is they can't come over to Michigan and we can't go over to Wisconsin. We don't have arrest powers there. So what we do is we can hold the scene or alleviate the situation until they arrive on scene, and vice versa. So there are going to be some challenges. There is overtime that we have no control over. Court, fire calls, specific police calls, such as a robbery or break-ins when we have to call out people, evidence techs to come in.
So you mentioned fire too?
What was that?
You have mentioned fire?
Yep, fire. Our fire calls, we roughly average about 60 calls. So if it's a busy fire season, those are going to be challenges we're faced with. If we have a increase in crime, which we've been seeing, calls for break-ins, we're calling out extra personnel for that, and just various situations. In court, we have no control over. So,
and they're also looking at, taking a serious look at this, because as they look at maybe 1 person on shift, things like that. They're looking at other ways or officer safety, things such as that.
We looked into. We just applied for a TASER grant through MMR or
MMR insurance company.
A lot of M's. We looked at TASERs. So we're looking at being that officers are going to be working by themselves, and ultimately we have these mutual aid agreements. But if Hurley's tied up on something, their response maybe 5-10 minutes. And that's a long time in certain situations. Gibbet County can be farther towards Watersmeet. They do have a contract car, but typically that car cannot leave the contract area unless it's a life-threatening emergency. So we're looking at acquiring tasers for our officers just to improve officer safety, and we're going to look at other opportunities out there so that ultimately everyone that's working is safe and not put in a dangerous situation, which is hard to avoid in our job sometimes. So, but we're looking at what we can do to protect them also.
And then we're looking to see here, as Andrew was promoted, there was a vacant PSO position, his position, not looking at filling that. There's other miscellaneous cuts. I looked through the budget and trimmed a little bit here, a little bit there, different line items out of the budget for about $10,000. It still leaves $115,000 right now unaccounted for reduction that has to take place. And I know they're talking, looking at things from, what can they do insurance-wise, benefit-wise, to see what they can come up with. If they can't come up with that, it ultimately results in some layoffs. And maybe a combination of those. They're still working through, what that will shape itself out to be. So that's where they're at. This is kind of I guess we're back to a little bit of the big picture. We have $837,500. Where are we looking at trying to trim that out of? $250,000 from public safety, $125,000 from street reserve, capital projects 30. We're moving one position to utilities from streets to utilities. We had an open position in utilities, so streets is a general fund position, so we're looking at moving one person over there. We have one retirement coming up that has solidified itself, so that's there. So that's a total of $550,000. So we still have, after all that, $287,500 still have to on the budget, even after that takes place. So then you come to the next page, and essentially it works out. You want to explain, Julie, the separation of that? It's basically almost an even split.
Yeah.
Between,
With the rest of the general fund, you've got your administration and the folks from AFSCME that hit the general funds. Your street people, local major, your parks, your cemetery, those folks. And it does balance out. I think the number of people is the same. It's either 7 or 8 for both of them. But obviously, like administration, the salaries are a little higher, but then with AFSCME, the health care is a little higher. So again, we took a look at it, and percentage-wise, it's about a 50-50 split as far as the actual costs of these two factions.
so then you turn to the next page, it's administration. So you said, okay, that quote, $143,000 roughly of cuts in that area. And again, we're looking at for administration and AFSCME furlough days. It's something we got to come up with some big ticket items. And again, a furlough day spreads the sacrifice, I guess, across the board to everybody. And what we're looking at to achieve the dollars we need to, adjust the budget is 1 day a week. Again, that's a 20% reduction in everybody's salary, AFSCME, and management. It's 1/5 of their salary. So I mean, it's a big, pretty significant hit for everybody. But that's what we're looking at. 4 day a week working. That's 8 hours a day, so it's not 4 10s or anything like that. Talking with the management folks, we said, let's make the changes to the healthcare concessions. That's what they're looking for. They're trying to get people to adjust their benefit package. So okay, that'll be something that management is looking to do. And then grant revenues. We've picked up more, I'll call it more work inside. We've talked with this, actually, I think we mentioned this at the last meeting. We got a call from the DOT that said they have revenue for a self-storage facility. I think I touched on that a little bit. 70% grant. We had been budgeting for that for a number of years. That went away last year. They called us and said, we were next in line for it. They said, if you want it, it's here. And by the way, if you design it, administer it, build it, spec it out, do the whole thing, we'll give you $25,000 to do that, instead of having a consultant do it. So we talked amongst some of the staff here. We said, can we take that on? We said, let's do it. Let's take it on. So that's $25,000 of additional revenue we weren't expecting before. So with those changes, that area could be shored up. And again, I think the big philosophical discussion was staffing versus concessions. And the decision was, let's go with concessions. We know it's coming. We know it's going to happen. Even after this, as the governor's requirements come into play, there's probably going to be some additional adjustments that are going to have to be made based on what their final document comes out at. So when you come to AFSCME, they got, again, the same thing, $143,000 roughly. Again, we have the 4-day work week. And then we have concessions. They are looking at that, I believe, looking at where can they tweak some of the things, healthcare, some of those type of areas. They've got a list of a number of areas that can be adjusted. Some of these are fairly straightforward. I mean, I hate to call them no-brainers, but some of these are things that, it makes sense to make an adjustment to. So I know they're looking at that. And ultimately, it'll come down to if enough concessions are given, there may not have to be a layoff. If concessions aren't given in the healthcare, they say, no, we want to keep our healthcare as is, no changes. Short of negotiating that out, and that's going to take some time to go through that process, there would have to be some layoffs. And that would range, the general fund from 1 to possibly 2 positions to see how that plays out. And again, those positions would have to be general fund positions. And again, the general fund is, if you look at it, and probably there's another slide here somewhere, but it's streets, parks, and cemetery are the general fund areas. And again, what we look at is if you've got multiple people in an area, so you can still keep the service, that's where we'd be looking to make the changes. So essentially in the street area, we have five street staff. They would have to be reduced by 1 or 2 people. And that's general fund. Now we come down to this kind of a separate aside, because this isn't a general fund topic, but we have the equipment fund. We explain that a little bit. That's a separate standalone fund that right now has to be balanced. And we're $50,000 short in there. So we have to look through that, and that potentially could result in another layoff, unless there's some other way to...
Why are we $50,000 short?
Because the revenue, we're losing revenue, and it's a catch-22. As we have fewer staff, right now the staff we have, they go out into a piece of equipment, and they're working on the streets, the water, the sewer. They bill that back to the equipment fund, and that's revenue that comes back into them. As there's fewer people, unfortunately, doing that work, there's less revenue coming back in. So we've got fewer people out there doing work on behalf of the city, less revenue coming back in. It's kind of a fallout. We hadn't really even looked at that until recently, and that's a kind of a fallout of reduced staffing. So,
Yeah, if you look back, like even the last 5 or 10 years especially, the revenues in the equipment fund have gradually been decreasing. And again, it correlates with staff size. If you don't have 40 people out with the equipment, you're not going to get the rents for the rental business. So as the staff is decreasing, the equipment is being decreased, the use of it, so we get less revenue.
We have like 600,000 in that fund.
Yeah, and really I think we're going to have to reduce that a little bit, because I don't even know, this year even, I don't know if we're going to hit
I guess I just
600,000.
understand, we have to maintain a certain minimum
For
for that fund,
It's got to be a balanced budget.
yeah, we have to, if our revenue is reduced, then we have to reduce our expenses. And we can look at, where can we reduce the expenses. So, but that's something that has to be addressed also.
So the equipment fund is funded by rentals from the various
Other funds.
uses of other funds. So I'm trying to understand, does the equipment fund, if you're not funding into it, then you're not losing money, then you're not paying out of the other funds. So the other funds don't they stay at a $50,000 level higher than they would be otherwise if they're not having to contribute to this?
Well, like the water fund, yeah. And that would be distributed out over the other funds that are built to it. In theory, yeah. That would be neat.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
You notice that in a real mild winter, your revenues in your equipment fund are way down, and your street funds look great because they haven't rented all that equipment.
And your goal with the equipment fund is to maintain a certain level of funding for repair and replacement of existing equipment.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
as that gets depleted, you're milking some of your other departments, even though they're saving money, they're not replacing that equipment.
Well, it's not being used, yeah. I mean, it's...
It's a hard concept
Yeah.
to grasp.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's kind of like a Hertz or an Avis rental. They get their revenues through renting.
But it's all from the same pool of money.
The equipment fund is the same pool, but it's coming from the water fund and the sewer
Yeah.
fund,
That's the
and the street
disconnect.
funds, and the cemetery
Cemetery,
fund.
as
They
a-
all pay for
Non-general
rentals.
funds.
It's a very good concept because the city's equipment is in very good shape. I think whenever this was set up 10 or 15 years ago, I mean, you hear the stories, and I mean, it was I won't say a nightmare, but I mean, it really has helped maintain and support the equipment for the city. So it's worked very well. This is the first time I think we've really had to take a serious look at reducing revenue. It's usually, cash flow itself, and it's been...
And like Tim said, that annually is generally maintained at about $500,000.
A little more.
If that were dropped down to $450,000, that's an area that we could, as a commission, agree that it could be a cost-cutting measure or not necessarily.
Well, it's kind of self-generated by, you're kind of cutting that just by reducing staffing. You cut the revenue to that. And I guess the theory is the other funds that are contributing to that should be a little more balanced, I guess, or not contributing to it. So
I guess I'm saying if you're having less people working and less need for equipment and all that, you need 500,000 to maintain that equipment, or can you drop down to?
But I think maybe the question is, do we continue to maintain the fleet we have?
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
That's-
I think that's what I'm getting
That's
at.
where we're going, and we're going to have to look at that. And I think we're already taking steps to, I mean, we're going to have to look at that more thoroughly, you know, and where that's going.
You feel that conservatively, $500,000 is the minimum to maintain the fleet of equipment that you have, and if it starts to go down, you need to consider.
We're actually looking at options. I mean, you were talking about having to replace the street sweeper. And one thing that they've been doing some checking, can we rent a street sweeper? Because we don't use it year-round, is it something that we can rent and not have to replace? Those kind of evaluations will have to be made to see if, you know, as that is getting reduced, we got to reduce our expenses too. So,
I understand that. Thank you.
yeah, that was kind of an aside that, unfortunately, is a result of the other potential changes. Again, we're planning for the worst case. You know, these cuts look like they're going to happen. There is the possibility, again, to get revenue back. So, again, they're taking the money away. Hopefully we can get this $220,000 back. As that comes back in, that will be earmarked to get the furlough days moved back up to a 5-day a week work week. And again, if you look at what our cost is for furloughs, we're at about almost $200,000 between administration and AFSCME. So we have to get almost that whole $220,000 back to shore us back up to a 5-day work week to provide the level of service that we can for the residents. You know? So that's the goal, is to try to get that happen. That's where it would be earmarked. With that, we have a second sheet here just that we gave to you. We won't go into too much detail. It kind of goes through the things we've been talking about here. It also lays out below that in blue, under management and AFSCME, the different areas that we looked at where potential savings could come from. You know, we show the 4-day work week, we show layoffs, we show furlough days, we show different healthcare options. So this is kind of the list that we've been trying to utilize to say, okay, if we do this, this, and that, we can shore up the budget. So, and again, that's what AFSCME is looking at the same thing. Okay, if we do this, this, and that, we can shore up the budget. And we've opened it up if there's any other suggestions, you know, that we haven't thought of, to, you know, bring those to the table, and absolutely everything is, you know, open to be looked at for savings to be achieved. Again, this has been, you know, tossed around and beat up many different times. I think it kind of boils itself down to, I mean, there aren't a whole lot of options. It's negotiate some changes to benefits or, you know, possible layoffs. And unless there's other ideas, I guess that's what we're here to talk about. Do you see anything else that we should look at, or some other angle to this that you want us to consider? We're getting to a point here where we're going to have to make some decisions administratively. And if people need to be noticed of a layoff within the next week or two, we have to provide people those notices. And we have plenty of time to react to that. And also, we've heard, you know, if someone is going to have to get laid off, they need the opportunity to look for other, you know, employment opportunities. And a lot of those are in the construction field. So hopefully we don't have to get to that point, but unless concessions are made, those are things that we'll have to be addressing here over the next week to 2 weeks.
And even the healthcare concessions, we have to have probably a good month or so to get those in place before July 1st. So, you know, it is a time thing. And as well as, you know, adopting the budget in June already, the first week. So it's going to have to happen.
So if we don't have the healthcare issues all clarified in time, what are our options at that point? So would we be able to, would we be locked into a health plan on July 1st? In other words, can we change it? Say the agreements came later in the calendar year, you know, we could reverse the layoff or whatever if the agreements came later.
If there was something to short the budget,
Would we be able to revise our health plan? We're not locked in.
No, I think we can.
Yeah, so we could bring some of that off layoff if we were able to shore up the funding and say, okay, you know, we got the funding. That's a possibility. But I do got to be clear that as we're getting funding in back from the state, that's going to be the first thing. The question was, do we bring someone back or do we shore everybody up to a 5-day work week? And the goal is going to be short everybody back up to a 5-day work week, get our current staffing and our current, resources back.
On that furlough, that 4-day, that 1-day per week furlough, is there a way to maintain a certain amount of office hours Monday through Friday, or were you thinking, what was your plan on the furlough?
I think if you look at it from a standpoint of trying to keep services going, and we kind of tried this with 4 10-hour days. We had people staggered on Fridays and Mondays, and it worked out where we actually didn't have people around on Friday or Monday because of vacations, sick time, things like that. It was a very, almost, I'll say, difficult to impossible thing to keep services going. And the expectation is that if you're open and available to the public, that we're here to,
Everybody should be.
yeah, all the services are there, which they will not be. And I guess the experience was not very positive when we tried that before, trying to do Fridays and Mondays, parts here, parts there. And again, it related back to people still have vacation time, sick time, things like that come up, and you're not able to effectively provide the service. So, and I think that's been, anyway, the
If
direction that we
folks
look at.
have accrued vacation time, they would only be able to apply that to a day, one of those 4 days.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's another challenge in itself, because, and again, you do have people that, they work all winter, they don't have to ask me, and they take their time off in the summer. So you still have to try to maintain a crew. They have to work a lot closer with Bob on, your vacation schedule, so we still have a functional crew to go out. But it makes it more challenging because you have fewer days to do that. And hopefully we'll, get notice back from the state that, yes, this dashboard will work. We've got $70,000 coming back to the city. We can reduce the number of furlough days, hopefully fairly quickly. And if we can get some of these other things in place, hopefully we can adjust that. So instead of 1 a week, it's maybe 1 every 2 weeks or 1 a month, and then hopefully back to full staffing or full support.
What are you looking for from the commission tonight?
I guess any direction you see us, see something like, have we looked at this, or there's other options that we haven't explored.
Questions. With this resolution, it doesn't look like we're going to lose the 350. I feel pretty strongly that we'll probably get the 226 back, because I think we're in line with what the governor wants. I just have a question, like personal property tax. Last year we got 160,000, so now we're not getting anything for that.
That's the expectation from what we're hearing, unless they change that now. Don't take that away from us.
And the census reduction, it was 50,000 last year we got, or
We're seeing a part of that already.
Yeah, we're going to be back subtracted this year already. That's about a fifth of our revenue sharing for this year is going to be reduced in our last 2 checks because of our drop in census population.
So even
Because it's based on a formula.
And is that tied to the statutory revenue sharing of 350?
No, that 350 was what they had slated for us for next year.
Or
Yeah.
with this additional, so
Yeah.
this is on top of it.
Yes, it's on top of it.
Last year you were maybe at 400.
Yeah, last year actually our total revenue sharing was close to 800,000. So right now the only thing we're guaranteed is like 400,000 minus, probably the 50,000 for the census adjustment.
Okay.
So we're going from almost 800,000 to 350 guaranteed right now.
so for sure we're going to lose the 50,000. And the personal property tax, we don't know about that yet.
No, it's still in committee.
Okay.
It looks kind of, I went on the website today too and looking, and it does kind of look like it's going to be pushed through. So.
For the retirement, we went to mayors to save money, but it actually ended up costing us $140,000 more. Is that like a one-time $140,000 or an extra $140,000 a year?
That is going to affect our contributions going forward now every year.
And maybe to clarify that, it wasn't switching to MERS that raised the increase in city contribution. It was they picked up on an incorrect calculation from the actuarial company that said you have to put so much aside
On our part or their part?
on their part.
Their part.
Mhm.
So we're getting billed for their error?
Well, we should have probably been putting that in for the last 10 years.
Long time.
It's not MERS there.
It's not MERS, it's the actuarial, the way they did their actuarial accounting. And now MERS looked at it and said, boy, have you looked into this issue? And they went back and said, no, we should have bumped it up 140,000 probably years ago. But they haven't. And not to do that would put the city in financial jeopardy going forward. Say, no, well, if they didn't pick up on that, they would, that never came up. Who knows, 5 years or 10 years down the road, retirement funding would be substantially short.
Yeah, actuarials use certain assumptions, and when they do the reports, it's basic assumptions that they use in their calculations. Well, they were assuming that we didn't have quite as much in our final average compensation. In other words, like the 2080 hours and the 800 hours, they were doing the industry standard. They weren't doing those big amounts that we do give, so that's where it wasn't being accounted for.
And that's part of what the governor wants to change too, is the new hires, because the change has like big payouts,